that unpredictability is what is driving the need for that agility, that flexibility, and it's making organization structures just a lot more loose and fluid because that's what's needed to respond.
The way work happens is changing, and courage belongs to the leaders willing to build what comes next. On today's episode of The Courageous Choice, I'm joined by Tony Buffum, a leader at the forefront of redefining how work gets done through the human cloud. Tony's work sits at the intersection of talent, technology, and execution, and his courageous choice has been to challenge traditional operating models in favor of more flexible, scalable, and human-centered ways of engaging expertise. This episode is for leaders who know the old models aren't keeping up and are ready to shape the future of work instead of reacting to it. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode of The Courageous Choice. Today's guest is Tony Buffum, a leader who's been at the forefront of flexible work, talent access, and what many call the human cloud long before it became a buzzword. Tony has spent his career helping companies rethink how work gets done, how expertise is activated, and how leaders move faster without sacrificing quality or trust. Just as importantly, he's made his own courageous leap to work differently, not as a strategy, but as a way of life. This is a conversation about speed, talent, and the courage to let go of models that no longer serve us. Welcome, Tony. I'm so excited that you're here with us today.
Me too, Jamie. What an awesome intro. I'm impressed. And I don't even recognize that person you just described, but sounds pretty good.
He's awesome. I've gotten to know him in the last few weeks, and now we're like best buds. It's pretty cool. Well, I appreciate you showing up. Every time we get to talk, we start kind of going back and forth, and it's one, I'm learning every time I talk to you, but I'm also my ideas start to evolve, and I start feeling like validation because you're out in the world, you're seeing it across organizations, you're talking to talent leaders and executives and PE firms and everybody who's trying to do the work faster, better, adapt. And so I'm excited to dive in and have the opportunity to kind of have another conversation. So maybe share with us
Yeah,
a little bit.
likewise. I enjoy every time we get to talk.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. Yeah, let's jump in. Share with us a little bit,
Yeah.
what you're working on from your perspective.
Yeah, Human Cloud I've been a part of for now over a year, but I've known Matt, co-founder of Human Cloud, for quite a long time, and we really I'd say, turned an interesting corner over the last year by launching the Human Cloud platform, which is essentially a marketplace for marketplaces. We've always had a media side of our business, which you've experienced in our podcast. We host dinner events to share thought leadership and get buyers in front of vendors and promote this partnership in workforce planning in a new way, and talent access, of course. But this for us is really exciting because we want to make it easier, faster, simpler, just to find the right marketplace or marketplaces for companies, businesses to work with. So that's what we endeavor to do. We're really excited about how it's evolved so quickly just in the last about 6 months.
What's I think unique about kind of you and I, right, is we're doing this in this space, trying to bring organization kind of and standards to the gig economy and make access clearer so people can get the right talent. But we both come from doing the work in-house, right, as leaders. And I know everybody on the East Coast knows you, but maybe on the West Coast, they don't know you as much. So share a little bit about your background just to give some perspective so people know kind of where you're coming from to the work.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially where you are on the West Coast, you could confuse me with my twin brother who also lives in San
I've been looking
Diego.
for
If
him.
you're walking around and you think you see Tony, might not be, although we don't look
Okay.
that much alike. But yeah, my background's been in HR. I grew up studying industrial and labor relations, went right into HR internships at companies like IBM and TI, then rolled off school into General Electric, where I did the typical kind of HR leadership rotational program and spent a couple of years there after that was complete, moving around quite a bit. And then joined the Stanley Works, really because I wanted to get to a certain location where my wife at the time grew up. We took that job, awesome global job, global acquisitions that we worked on. And then after about a year, asked us to relocate to focus on a really important turnaround of another business that kind of bled into the acquisition of Black and Decker. So lots of, kind of turnaround work and integration work. Then after years of doing that, was moved to Indianapolis, where I had to do another kind of turnaround situation with Stanley's security business. Did that for about 5 years, 4 years, and then joined Upwork. Or no, then actually, oh my, I was going to skip my biggest job. Then I went to work as CHRO at a public company for a couple of years. It was after that that I joined Upwork for about 3 years because I'd really been bitten by that bug of flexible work and thinking differently about resource strategies within organizations. And then about a year and a half ago, left Upwork and now am full time with Human Cloud.
That's really interesting. So as you think about, because Upwork, I mean, it got big, and you were there during a lot of their growth, I think. And what drew you to the whole flexible work and human cloud strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it was really Upwork that exposed me to it. I was at that security business in Stanley, which is a really big corporate organization, about 10,000 people globally. A big part of the company was tech and service folks are out in the field, but in different countries all over the world. And I I really struggled with how to get our organization the talent that we needed. We had a very rigorous staffing, resourcing strategy. We had monthly reviews of our headcount, of our ads, folks that left. It was really detailed. And as we built out our workforce plans, the biggest challenge for me and my HR team was to make sure that we're getting the right people in the right place at the right times. We always hear that. That's harder to do than it is to say, especially with constantly changing demands in the business and kind of that macro talent market dynamic. And so I kept going to partners, traditional partners I had, recruiting agencies, staffing agencies, and trying to come up with something different that we could do to be better at meeting the needs of the cross-functional leaders I worked with. Because I hated constantly feeling behind and getting them the talent that we needed. And I always felt like, especially on the commercial side, if you're not getting the talent in, and all of a sudden now your revenue or your kind of top level numbers are starting to slide, it really puts pressure on the entire rest of the business. And so, for all those reasons, I felt like there had to be a better way. In the meantime, I'm getting calls from Upwork on a regular basis and totally ignoring it. Oh, that's not for me. That's for startups or whatever. And then they'd shared enough information to pique my interest. The most important one being that by 2030, roughly 50% of the US population would be working independently. And I remember that number really resonated with me because I thought either it was made up or it was true. And if it was true, we were in trouble. And so I remember I attended a networking event hosted by Cornell by GE in Boston. And at the end of the event, it was focused on talent and staffing. I asked other folks, said, "Hey, have any of you heard of Upwork? Like, do you know anybody who work with these talent marketplaces? Because I keep hearing from them. I don't know if this thing is real or not." And when leaders at GE and Procter and Gamble and Samsung were telling me, "Yeah, we spend millions, frankly, in this space because it helps us close a lot of gaps we have for talent." That's when the light bulb like finally went off, and it felt like it was way late. And I felt like we're missing something in our organization. We need to get on this. And so as soon as I got back, I called them back and we started working through how do we make this happen at Stanley or Stanley Black and Decker. And that was the beginning of the rest of the story. It immediately opened my eyes to how much this can be leveraged to fill those gaps, get talent in faster, and just get things done. And it wasn't just for startups, it's for any organization. But most importantly, it would connect us with in-demand talent as long as we could accept that they would be remote. They might be in another country, wherever they might be, as long as we can put together the logistics to make it work, we can start getting work done. And very often we were finding the talent and getting them deployed literally within 1 or 2 days. So when that really started taking off is when I started feeling like we're onto something, and I was so excited to champion it at our
That's
company.
huge. I think that's, this conversation between kind of the supply and demand, right? That change in, like, that's what's different, I guess. Like there's always been consultants, but you and I have already had the conversation about what does that mean? And there's a bunch of assumptions around consultants. But now with people really choosing to work differently, that that how do you solve the capability, in an organization in a timely fashion to move as fast as you can? The options have just changed. And I don't know that everyone really understands it yet. I mean, as you're talking to talent leaders, do you think it sounds like, I mean, you were already part of some who were getting it and incorporating it. And we definitely see that too. But I think some of the smaller mid-sized companies maybe that just don't have access to as many of the tools yet are, and their leaders, the kind of default to the head count, like let's place a job. And I mean, how are you seeing that progress in the whole supply demand thing?
Yeah, it's still kind of a slow awakening. And to me, it should feel more like a revolution on all sides. And I say that because it was slow for me. Like as I told you, I resisted it until I didn't. And once I didn't, I felt like I can't believe I didn't understand this better sooner. But I really felt fortunate to be the HR person driving this in the organization, because a lot of times what I see is that it's coming from marketing, coming from technology. They get it. They need talent. They're comfortable with this somewhat different feeling arrangement, and they just need to get work done now, and they can't always wait for the drawn out and super burdensome and cumbersome staffing process that we're used to. So they just partner with these marketplaces and they get talent fast, and when they're done they go back to the marketplace when they need them again. To me, the challenge is this is just different than what most people are used to. It's different than the traditional staffing model. And whenever I talk to organizations, small or huge, they had the same hesitations. They're worried that if someone's a freelancer or independent worker, that they're not really that skilled, or they can't get a real job, so they're doing this as like a side hustle until they do, or they have to worry about security, or all these things that frankly exist in similar ways with full-time staffing, but we tell ourselves myths that they don't exist. And they're all things that once people start working with independent talent, they realize they're all wrong. Like all this talent is really exceptional. They want to work this way, and when you start to understand why, like the control, the independence, then it's not surprising that you're finding exceptionally talented folks working for themselves.
You know, it's so well said. I've started coining this term, executive entrepreneurs, because I think that there's this, like, especially people who are super talented. I mean, I just have a fundamental belief that everybody does better work when you're doing something that you like, right? Like when you have fun with it, right? So that's just no matter who you are, what level you are, I just believe that. And then once you've accomplished, a certain amount of experience and you're doing things and you know yourself better, and then you have some confidence to go start your own thing, build a practice doing whatever that thing is that you're great at, like there's something in that. And especially like right now, when you're thinking about leaders that are driving transformation, HR professionals that are driving transformation, just transformation and change experts, communications, people who are in that I'm a builder, I'm a change agent. Those people, it would make sense that they would be kind of the first to maybe make the leap, to not feel that it's risky. And quite frankly, the work aligns with it too, because those aren't necessarily permanent jobs, right? Like you come in, you do the thing. I mean, I used to say my attention span was like 2 to 3 years because that's just what I would do. It didn't mean I was bad. I was like all in, but then I'd, move on to the next thing. And so I think that's another way to look at it. And then as more people are joining that, it just gives all this optionality for talent leaders in organizations to be thinking about building capability in a totally different way. It really shakes the game up, I think.
Yeah, and I think back to my career, like you talking about that 2-year attention span, coming out of school and working on these 8-month, rotations. And then when that was done, pretty much every year there was something new. Either was a big expansion in the scope of responsibility I had, or a total change to a business within my business that, had me focus on a totally different industry and different, business models, and certainly working on things like acquisitions and integrations and all the transformation that comes from that. It's constantly changing, and each one just feels like a major project, one after the other. And frankly, I often felt like I was constantly a free
Yeah.
agent. Like, well, what do we need to
Within the
work on?
organization.
Okay, that's where I go
Yes.
next. Yeah, so I think this is something that people are more comfortable with than organizations think. Like they're ready. The majority of folks, more than 50% of students already choose to work independently over traditional full time jobs. And I think that's very indicative of what the rest of the talent pool looks like. If they can, they do, or at least they want to. And if they're not doing it now, they will. And we'll see that stat that I referenced earlier come to life, I think, in short order because so many people are choosing this as the way they prefer to work. And it fits with the way that organizations are constantly transforming, changing, taking on new big projects, finishing those up and moving into a different direction.
It totally makes sense. I mean, I think that you think about. So I talk to universities, and it's even changing how they define student success because it used to be like placement in a full time job. But if the students don't want placement in a full time job, then that metric gets messed up, right? Looking at student success. And I think this is a courageous choice, right? Like the fear associated, or that used to be associated with, companies used to be perceived as that stable, right? I want to, I'm going to be safe working in a organization. And with all the changes, I don't think that, certainly the people that are coming into the workforce, they don't look at companies and go, oh, you're going to provide security for me and my family until I turn 60. Like that's not what they're thinking, right? You know?
Yeah, that's something I used to talk about when I'd present for Upwork all the time. Apologies for my excited dog barking at the
That's
Amazon
very
delivery guy.
exciting. Yeah.
But it's such a contrast from my dad. I like to use him as an example, graduating from going to work for Xerox for his entire career and retiring with a pension. And I always joke, I'd have to explain what a pension is because those have gone the way of the dodo for pretty much all non-government employees. And that kind of paternalistic relationship that companies had with their talent has completely disappeared. And frankly, you can look also at companies like Xerox and Kodak that as they shrunk, had these massive layoffs and really disrupted the entire city. And we see that still happen over and over. And we've kind of gotten used to it or almost numb to hearing about tens of thousands of employees getting laid off at a time. And that's just become the rhythm of work, especially with public companies. We often see it right before earnings. They're trying to tell a narrative, a story to buoy their stock price. And it's just how they become accustomed to operating. So I think anybody that's come through and seen that experience over the last several decades has acknowledged that the relationship you have with an organization isn't so much about this kind of endless loyalty. It's more about the job you have at that time. And then frankly, adding technology like the LinkedIn's and your resume is posted 24/7. You can go anywhere. It's so much more frictionless to leave a job and start another one. Add remote work. Really, like I'm in the same office every day, no matter who I work with. I think all of those things have influenced a massive shift in the way that talent thinks about itself and its ability to go work for whoever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want.
Yeah. I think it's just really exciting to me. I think there's a ton of opportunity, but when you or and I should say and as you think about those implications, right? From an employee life cycle, from a culture, from a how do you really, drive high performing teams? What do our leaders need to understand when they have now this mix of flexible and I don't know, flexible and fixed? I don't know what we call like the alternate, but you're going to have teams that are composed of both. I mean, what are the conversations you're having with talent leaders? Like, okay, get the talent. I think people are understanding, now that they can get it. But once it's there, like how do you optimize that?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, that's one of the first questions that comes up, at least from HR leaders when they're considering working with flexible talent is what about culture? Like, how do I manage this group? Because I don't want a group of second class citizens, but are they going to be as engaged and committed as my full time employees? And how do I allow them to work together? And what I tell them is manage them like they're a team. This is a diverse team with different needs and different capabilities and skills, but they need to collaborate. So the most important things are, do they have the right tools and the right boundaries set and expectations around collaboration? Because that's what's going to make a team actually work and be productive? Do they understand what the expectations are for each of them? And when you bring in those flexible workers, they come in very focused on what does success look like? How do I make sure I deliver the outcomes on time according to what was defined up front? And they make sure that's well defined, which frankly, oftentimes traditional employees aren't thinking that because we just allow everything to be so fluid with expectations and deadlines and boundaries. And so it helps to bring all that perspective together and strike that understanding and then manage the group as the team that they are and not get caught up on what their classifications are, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. The label doesn't matter. It's almost like if everybody's working towards the KPIs, but they're aligned, I think it's a great way to organize it the way that you said. Thinking about how do you kind of organize them, but then basically like some of these people who we have in gig talent that we vet for the ability to be part of a team. So you have to have like the technical expertise, and many of the people that are part of gig talent are not, we say, well, they're not joiners, right? Because they were all doing their own thing, they have their own practice, they have their own organization that they're building, but they are teammates. They do want to be part of something bigger. We say consulting doesn't have to be a lonely gig, and I think it's true in the work. Like you can't bring, I mean, maybe there's some like software development or people who you're just behind a screen and the team doesn't matter. But even that, right? If you're working in sprints or you need to collaborate and communicate, like just to be clear for anybody who's thinking about going into the gig economy, it doesn't mean you get to avoid people, right? It's actually, you're still going to be part of teams. You're still going to work well. And so I think as you're sourcing for any resourcing or organization, like you said, regardless of the label or the category, like, can they work as part of a team is important too. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think folks that are changing are working with multiple different clients and they're working on different projects, whether it's for 3 months or 3 years, they really get accustomed to how they can hit the ground running, make those connections with the team so that they can be effective collaborators and do that quickly. I think back to me, that was part of the benefit, even when I was on that rotational program earlier in my career, because you're going to be somewhere for 8 months. You want to make an impact that you can be proud of, that people are going to think you did a good job, and you're going to leave something behind, but you have a short amount of time to get that done. You really focus on what's going to allow me to make the right connections, really bond with the folks I'm working with, and make sure I understand what I need to do to make an impact quickly because you don't have time to just linger around and let it come to you. You've got to go out and get after it. And I think that's exactly how folks that are working as contractors or independents with a full-time team, they're focused on the same things because they want to make sure that they form those important connections, they establish those expectations, and they can get to work quickly so they can deliver an impact as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's really, really exciting. When you are talking to like PE firms, because I know you do some work there too, how are they thinking about it? I mean, I know they bring in teams. Obviously, they might have turnarounds, they've got integrations. My pedestal is about how like the culture, leadership, and people side is where the synergies actually fail a lot of times. So how do those conversations go?
Yeah, often I mostly dealt with human capital leaders or partners or managing directors at PE firms. So they're looking across their entire portfolio, of companies. And oftentimes, what they're most focused on is their C-suite. They're interested in staffing companies that they can work with, assessment companies, things that will help them find the right talent, get them in place, so that they can move on to the next company that is in desperate need of some kind of C-suite change. But I always tell them, what happens after you get them into place? Like they're also, just like I described, they're under the gun. There's 3 to 5 minute or 3 to 5 years they have to deliver value as part of this value creation plan. And if they don't have the team that they need, they're making changes that take a year or 2 years until they've got everybody they need. And they don't have that luxury of time. So I say, what do you do to make sure they have the resources they need to get to work quickly and start getting traction with their plans? And they're kind of left to their own devices. They got to go find their staff and they offer resources, but oftentimes those resources aren't marketplaces like we're talking about. And that's where I think there's a big gap because if they're making staff changes, then they need talent to fill the gap. If they're working on a transformation, they need to bring in expertise that's probably not in house. Or if they're bringing in leaders, they might need a level below those leaders to help receive the delegation and go after and get work done. There's all sorts of reasons why they'll likely need talent that they can bring in on a part-time or a fractional basis to make sure that they're delivering on these plans. And the best part is at the PE firm level, just like they do with their executive talent, they can typically maintain that talent that works in one portfolio and moves on to a different project. They can now recommend them to work on another portfolio. So having their own human cloud of talent that they've curated through these different experiences allows them to get talent that they know is effective, that's really successful, and leverage them across their entire business. But best of all, as they're very focused still on cost and headcount management, they're only paying for what they need. Like they need somebody for 6 or 9 months on a project or some kind of AI transformation. Then they're getting the expert in, they're using them, and they're moving on. And they're focusing their fixed headcount or traditional headcount on roles that need to be in place for the core foundation of the organization's business model for years and
Yeah,
years.
like the way I talk about it is during that time, right, at post acquisition or with new leadership, that's that time of lots of transformation. You're trying to bring the organization along. You're trying to operationalize the expected synergies, those kinds of things. So you probably need either more senior, more experienced people or additional resources than you might need in your ongoing cost model, right? From a headcount perspective. So, but you need to meet that investment. And so we do that. That's what gig talent. I mean, we've got the people who can come in and do that and be those extra bolsters or be that leader in the interim. And then what we'll see with Amplify our executive search is we'll have an interim there. We'll help them hire the ongoing person so that you kind of get to that more stable state and then you transition to your ongoing leader that is at the right experience level, cost level, everything else that you need going forward, but you don't skip a beat, right? And so I think that it just makes sense. You might, it's like in an organization, no, you have a bandwidth issue. If you're trying to create some big change, you need to augment those internal teams with the right experience and talent, but that doesn't mean you're going to stay there, right? And so it's that ability to flex. I mean, you guys talk about flexible talent all the time, and I think that that's just new. We're not used to thinking about it.
Yeah, we're not, but we're of course firm believers that flexible is the future of work. Organizations, especially now, it really felt like, especially over the last few years, the macroeconomic dynamic is changing so fast. Part of that's driven by technology. Part of that's driven by rapidly changing and adapting policies to this kind of new world that we live in. I think all of these factors make it really hard to predict what a company is going to be able to do in the next year. And certainly new things are going to come up that they didn't expect. And their ability to adapt their organization to whatever this is. And technology is the best example because it's moving so fast. But being able to get in skill sets that they didn't have yesterday, they need today, but they don't know if they're going to need tomorrow. The unpredictability is what is driving the need for that agility, that flexibility, and it's making organization structures just a lot more loose and fluid because that's what's needed to respond. And if they're too stuck in a certain kind of model or structure, then I think they're really going to struggle to meet the demands of today.
I think about it when, I mean, we've both been there where they're like, I need this person. It's a unicorn. They're half this, half that. And like, it totally doesn't exist, right? But today, like, you can go get the whole, and at a fractional level or whatever, and solve that gap in without trying to find someone who's maybe force fit into something, trying to solve those specific needs. Just because I don't know if everybody knows what human cloud is, and Gig Talent's really excited to be part of it. We love you and Matthew and all of that. But just if people are interested, how can they engage with human cloud? And you said that in the last 6 months you've gotten really clear. So maybe just expand a little bit there.
Yeah. Human cloud endeavors to bring this flexible work future to companies, enterprises, and make it easier, faster than ever to do so. Because we know that it's lived experience for all of us on the team, just as you described for yourself, that this is something that every company should do if they're not already doing. But it can be difficult to to navigate all of the options, especially when I started in 2017, kind of going down this path. There was probably several dozen different companies that to choose from. And of course, I started working with the biggest one. But now there's literally hundreds and thousands of marketplaces all over the world. And the hardest thing when you're looking to partner with somebody new is how do you kind of boil that ocean of options? And that's what we do at Human Cloud. We try to help folks by leveraging trust through things like validation, certifications, different badges, what we call kudos, essentially reviews, things that help build trust and understanding of these different marketplaces so that companies can make better choices. And the best way for them to engage is just go to app.humancloud.com and put in a search for something that you feel like, a skill set that you feel like you've needed, but you haven't been able to find that it'll pull up the different marketplaces or other providers that you could work with, and you can start seeing what those options look like. I think it's nice to just kind of go shopping if you're curious and check it out. But if it's something where it sparks that curiosity and you want to dig further, you can now build your own account as a buyer, as a user of these marketplaces, and start saving different information about ones that you've checked out, different business cases you can request, start providing feedback, things that will make this a lot more of an interactive experience, but prepare you for making that decision as soon as you're ready. And to me, if we could help organizations instead of taking months, if not years, to onboard a marketplace or marketplaces, then we're adding a lot of value all around in this ecosystem of talent and providers and
It's
employers.
totally structured to this ecosystem. And it's the same way, like, if you partner with Gig Talent, right, you get one organization through procurement, and then you have access to the hundreds of certified, vetted, and we can, get very specific and diagnose. But there's no way as a leader or talent leader that you can interview all these independent people and try to figure out who's good at what, and then deal with getting them all through procurement and the compliance around it. It's just so I'm really excited as your solution, our solutions together, people start to understand what we're solving. And I think there's just almost no way that we can't really be adding a ton of value in that ecosystem. That's just like the Wild West a little bit.
It is a bit like the Wild West, and it can be overwhelming. And so having that extra support and leveraging that experience of others into making those decisions certainly makes it a lot easier, a lot more digestible. And there's so many great marketplaces just like yours. I mean, I think, to your point, being able to partner with someone and know you have access to all of these experts in one place that you've already curated for them. You just have to find the right fit. You can immediately get to work. I mean, that's terrific for anybody, especially as they know they're facing straight into some kind of transformation and they're going to need help. There's always a bandwidth stretch within the existing organizations. When you can bring in that expertise, people that have been through that before, helped other organizations through their transformation, you're bringing in all this experience that you can't find on your own team. And you certainly don't want to go out and hire full time for a need that is temporary.
100%. All right. Final question, Tony. What does choosing courage look like for you today as you go forward?
For me, I mean, this is it. This is what I'm doing at Human Cloud. I've been in these large organizations my whole life, like my whole career. So it was kind of a leap to leave and then partner with Matt on Human Cloud. But I felt strongly enough that this is a big thing that's changing. Like I can see the massive shift taking place. I really want to be at the center of it. I want to be a part of not just joining one organization and helping to modernize their talent strategy, but be a catalyst for tons of organizations to do that. And I really believe that this is a great way for us to do that. And with that, it requires a lot of thought leadership. It requires a lot of education for folks that are in roles that I used to hold. And I really want to help them get to this point because I know the impact that they can have on their organization is huge. And I especially, more than anything, I really want to see HR be the ones that are championing, driving this change. Because if they're not leading it, I still believe it's going to happen, but it's going to happen to them, not with them. And they could be displaced. So I think now is a critical time for HR to learn more, embrace this, and drive this much needed change. and help their organizations think differently about workforce planning, workforce management, and what makes up the resources they access on their team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like organizational capability overall between AI and the human capability, and then having that human lens, because at the end of the day, it's still a system made up of people and technologies and other things. And I think you're spot on that this is a really cool, powerful opportunity for HR leaders to lead. And if they don't, then somebody else will. But it's such an honor to be in this with you. I think what I think really, as you were talking, what resonated with us when we first met was like, we want to bring organization and simplification to what is changing that's big, and it is an ecosystem, and it's like for ourselves and for those people who are in seats that we've sat in, and it's really just that trying to add value, but we see what's coming and it's exciting. And so I'm super grateful and excited to be on this journey with you, and thank you for being with us here today, Tony. I super appreciate it.
No, absolutely my pleasure. I love what you're doing. I love what it brings to organizations. Super excited about this executive piece. I think it's this. I think it's going to add a lot of value to organizations and help them through these massive transitions. So really excited to see what comes from that, and happy to talk with you. And hopefully, we can do it a lot more in the future.
Absolutely, we absolutely will. Thank you so much, and thanks for listening to us today. We'll talk to y'all soon. Leadership is shaped one courageous choice at a time. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who needs it, and follow the show to stay part of the conversation. To learn more about how we help leaders and organizations navigate what's next, visit Gig Talent. Welcome to the brave new world of work.